You don't need to figure out how to be different to everybody else. You just need to double down on being yourself. Welcome to Big Creatrix Energy. I'm Gabriella Rosie, this is Vivian, and look, we had our co-creatrix session this morning and we were doing Mad Libs of building out your dream audacious creative project. Imagining if you got a DM from your fave and they were asking you if you wanted to collaborate on something, and then basically going right ahead and being audacious and planning out what that project would be. And what came up for a lot of us, definitely what came up for me, was that I already have the ideas that I want to do and I already know how I want to double down, how I want to go harder at the exact goals that I already have, the exact vision that I already have. And it's almost like we use the people we look up to, we use the people who inspire us as a way to understand ourselves and a way to understand the world and interpret the whole world around us. I really think that is the role that art plays. Art is our way of communicating with each other. So taking in the art of other people is like, how are you communicating with me? And what is it about the way these particular people, how they create, that resonates with me and hits something in me so deeply that motivates me to want to create something myself and motivates me to dream about the possibility of even working with that person, because I know it can bring something out in me. So what we were playing around with in the Creatrix Coven today was taking the incentive to not just have these dream fantasy projects as some distant thing, but to actually bring them into our reality. And look, the things that people were coming up with, so inspiring, so exciting. And I wrote about this on Threads after the call, because whenever we have these calls inside the Creatrix Coven, we're chatting and getting to know each other better and getting to know each other's creative expression and each other's ideas. Me as the host of the space, it only motivates me more to share more things inside the membership and share more resources, because I'm like, these babes need to make these things and I need to give them everything I possibly can to help them, even just a tiny bit, even just 1%, even if it's just that espresso shot, that coffee shot in the morning, to get them going, to take the action, to take the initiative, to dream that little bit further. So it only just motivated me even more about having this space and making content like this and just sharing on what creativity is and what it can be and just how good it feels to pursue and explore ourselves through our creative expression. Because I really see the way that we develop our creative voice, if that's not being yourself 1,000%, then I don't know what is. Understanding the things that interest you and deciding to go deeper on them, that's what creativity is. It's deciding this is the color palette you enjoy, this is the sounds you enjoy, so letting yourself go deeper and deeper into it, letting your whole world be coated in that layer of things that specifically inspire you. So I don't know, I'm just feeling very excited about that. And I've also been watching the Oscars today, and by watching the Oscars I really just mean seeing every single freaking highlight of them on social media, because you really don't have to even watch award shows anymore. You're just gonna find about everything that happens, whether you want to or not, through Instagram, through Threads, whatever. I usually really like watching the Oscars, but this year I feel like I've barely watched any movies that are nominated, so I'm not actually that excited about, I don't actually care that much. But that side, outfits, spectacular, vibes, spectacular. Ryan Gosling's I'm Just Ken performance, spectacular. But something that just hit me in my heart and in my soul that speaks so specifically to this. By the way, I haven't even introduced this yet, but we're talking about a card from the Cosmic Brilliance deck, which is literally be yourself, but even harder. So Joy Randolph won Best Supporting Actress. And in her acceptance speech, which is beautiful, strongly advise you to go watch it. She says, I always wanted to be different. Now I realize I just needed to be myself, which, be yourself, but even harder, fully exemplifies. So what she was saying in her speech reminded me of this card, and it's something that I've had that I wanted to record an episode on and speak on, because it's really foundational when it comes to expressing yourself fully as a creative. One thing I want to speak on this episode is this general feeling of boredom and a lack of excitement that seems to have spread over the internet and spread over the world lately, of people just feeling a little bit complacent, a little bit phased, a little bit jaded by reality and the ability to live even an exciting life. And I think this is the role that creativity plays, and this is the job for us as creatrixes, as creatives, to inject energy where it feels depleted for the masses. And I want to talk about that, and how there's this blanket bleaching sameness, and how individuality and leaning into your specificness is really the antidote to that. And also how we can use two things to lean into our own artistic expression and share in the way that is so specifically you, and how you can start exploring this concept of being yourself even harder. I'm going to read to you from the Cosmic Brilliance guidebook to kick us off on the topic of be yourself, but even harder. And it says, becoming yourself is some of the most fun you will ever have. This is your opportunity to double down on what turns you on and completely disregard everything else. Play with exaggerating the aspects of your personality that you love the most. Imagine one of those caricature artists drew you, but it wasn't only your face. Illustrate your soul, your interests, your tastes. Conjure up that image and try on the costume. And the action step is to literally cosplay as yourself for a day. I really love the idea of turning the dial up on like the specific nuances that make you you. And when I look to the people who I feel like really embody the fullness of their creative expression, they are caricatures of themselves. They are so specifically themselves that it's completely over the top. It's completely like taken to a ridiculous level. And look, if you look at them and their trajectory of their lives and their creative expression, they weren't just born like that. In some ways you can roll back, and through hindsight you can see the traces of who they were throughout their entire life. The same way that if you look at yourself and the things that you're obsessed with now, if you trace back through your life, through your own childhood, you will see glimpses of what you can turn the dial up was existing from day dot, from the beginning. You've always been your weird little self, and it's only when you notice and when you allow yourself, you give yourself the full permission to be so specifically yourself, to disregard what isn't the things that turn you on, disregard the things that don't interest you, that don't set your soul on fire, and let yourself go all in on what truly excites you. And look, this is the thing, right? The reason we don't do that is because of fear, is because we don't think it's going to work, is because we don't necessarily see the example of it working, purely because you have to be the example of it working. Nobody can ever be the specific version of you that you are. So we're sitting here and we're looking out and we're searching constantly for these examples of inspiration that give us a sign that we can be ourselves, give us a sign that we can show up in the world in the way that we fantasize about, that there are other people who want that thing as well. But it doesn't make sense, baby cakes, because what we're waiting for is ourselves. What we're waiting for can only be given and shared by ourselves. What we're waiting for is the exact thing that only we are capable of creating and sharing with the world. And this is where bravery steps in. This is where vulnerability steps in. So what I'm seeing now is this feeling of being bored by the world, being bored by the templates we feel that we have to follow, the sameness that we see when we're scrolling through Instagram and we're seeing, this copy and pasted content and feeling like we have to follow a formula, feeling like we have to fit into the mold to be successful. And of course that's not true, because if you look to the people who you check up on, whose profiles you really care about, whose art you really care about, chances are they're probably not going to be the people who are following that same. They're probably going to be the people you're scrolling past, who are blaring into the background. And that's probably going to be the content that is making you feel so fucking bored with the way that social media is and the way that the content we consume just across, beyond social media, across to everything in the world. There is always going to be this mass appeal kind of stuff. And there's always going to be a time and space for that in all of our lives, honestly. But if you want to feel satisfied, if you want to have fun, if you want to feel like you're contributing something that is meaningful to you, then you have to allow yourself to take the risk and to be brave enough to share yourself and to be the person who's willing to step out on a limb, to do things in your own way and take the chance on being like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't even know the way that I want to do it. But going through the process of developing yourself, developing your style, it isn't something that you begin with. You don't necessarily even know the end game of what this future caricature version of your fully actualized creatrix self is, but through allowing yourself to embody it even more and even more, of figuring out, I love it when things are like this, and I'm going to try and go deeper on this element of my personality and explore this specific thing that I feel called to. When we fall into the trap of niching down, of thinking that there is, a specific framework that we have to follow, of thinking that we have to make ourselves easily digestible to be welcome in the world or to be understood in the world, then what happens through that process of intentionally niching down to be understood, to be digestible, what the reality of that is stripping apart layers of yourself, filtering yourself and removing the juice, removing the intricacies, removing the details of what you have to offer that doesn't fit in with the pre-existing mold. So through trying to simplify yourself, you extract everything that could potentially set you apart, everything that holds your superpower to come up and own your own space, to contribute something that nobody else ever possibly could. So it makes no sense, right, to try and fit into the mold and to try and follow the formula and to try and simplify yourself. There is a huge amount of risk that goes into allowing yourself to go on the journey of understanding who you are and what it is that you have to contribute. You don't need to know what that is from the beginning, and I think it's impossible. Even when you look to people who are so far ahead in their creative careers and who have achieved so much and been able to really distinguish themselves apart from the rest of the pack, even those people, it's only because we have the hindsight of looking back on how the pieces lined up in their careers and in their bodies of work that we can see the bigger picture, that we can see who it is they've become. But I'm sure they didn't know along that journey. I'm sure they still don't know where they're heading. They still don't know how the pieces are going to come together. And they can have some idea of it. They can have some dreams of it and some visions of it. But we will never know how the pieces fit together and what pieces fit together, because usually it's these contradictory pieces that we think don't make sense. The parts of us that are like, I'm into this thing, but I'm also into this wildly different thing, and I don't know how to make sense of these two things together. It's when we allow ourselves to play in that space of contradictions and juxtapositions that we create something completely different. This is where you're able to contribute something that other people wouldn't necessarily have organically brought together, because Nobody else has the specific interests that you have. And the more you let yourself lean into that and explore that, then you're able to get clearer and clearer on what it is that makes you you, without necessarily having to spell it out, without having to put your finger on what your gap in the market is that you're filling or what your niche is, but it being this organic thing that arises through the specificity of being who you actually are. The best art tells us about ourselves. When you see something and it lights something up within you, some feeling of recognition of, oh my God, I can't believe that thing exists, or I can't believe I didn't think of that thing. And I think that feeling of recognition in art that someone else has created, and that feeling of having it communicate with you so deeply, having something some complete strangers created resonate with you deeply, there are two things at play that creators put into their work to create that, and that you need to be aware of if you want people to resonate with what you are creating on a deep level as well. And those two things are risk and vulnerability. Without risk and vulnerability, what you're creating is going to be bland and it's going to be boring to both you and to the audience. When you have vulnerability, when you have risk, that's when you have that sense of danger and passion and something truly happening through the thing that you are creating. You have that feeling of change and feeling of momentum because you're not just resting on what's already been tried and tested. You are truly creating. You are truly in the space of invention and innovation. And of course, that requires vulnerability and risk. So we feel seen in the specifics of art when the creator is so specifically themselves. You know, when you're watching a movie and there's a moment in it where you see something flash across their face and you recognize that feeling, you recognize that vulnerability in it. Or when there's a joke and it's so specific, right? A joke that is so specific, you're like, you have picked this up from like my friend group, or you have like overheard a conversation between my family because that is too specific of a joke for somebody else to tell. And it's in that specificity that like feels like magic. It feels like a magic trick, right? When somebody highlights a part of us that feels secret or feels hidden or feels unknown, that's when it tickles us. That's when the magic tickles us from within. And you can't hit that magic. You can't tap into that magic of sharing a piece of art, whether it's a joke, whether it's a piece of music, whether it is a movie, a scene, whatever it is. But that little moment of magic can't hit if it's something that is broad. A broad joke cannot connect in the same way that a specific joke can. It just can't. So why are we fooling ourselves thinking that we want to do the broad thing? Why are we fooling ourselves thinking that we want to speak to the masses, that we want to be broad, that we want to try and be different or try and be something, when in reality we are already given the perfect skill set to be one of infinity, which is, you know, as corny as it is, to be so specifically yourself that nobody could ever even come close to that. Nobody could even tap into that little magic of hitting something, resonating with people in a really deep way, because that's your specific way. That's the thing that your senses are attuned to. When I think about hitting on this magic point with creativity, this point of secret recognition, it feels to me like the lyrics in Killing Me Softly, where she sings, "He sang as if he knew me in all my dark despair." It's that moment of like, how the hell, how did you know? How did you know this part of me, this depth of me? And we all have that feeling, that longing of being seen, of being understood, of another human understanding the depths of us, whether it's the depths of our despair or it's the depths of our joy or whatever feeling it is. We want to be seen. We want to find these common points, these common grounds. We seek that out through the art that we listen to and watch and look at, but we also seek it out in the art that we create. And that's the way that the conversation keeps going. That's how we not only consume, but we contribute to the conversation. That you can contribute those little knowings of vulnerability and risk, and you can lean into what is your own little magic trips of noticing and seeing other people and of seeing yourself. So let's talk about it. What does it actually look like to be yourself? To drop the dance of trying to be different and to just double down, to go harder on being yourself. What does that even look like? Sometimes when we're figuring out what something is, it's easier to come to terms with what it isn't. So being yourself, it's obvious, right? But being yourself is not following the trends. Being yourself, but even harder, isn't doing what you're doing, but having your peripherals on whatever the fuck anybody else is doing. Being yourself, but even harder, is giving yourself the full permission to be obsessed with specifically what you are obsessed with, and not doubting through the process whether a reference to some obscure movie is going to resonate with people or not, because that isn't even the point. I was watching an interview the other day with Tyler, the Creator, and Jared Carmichael, and they were talking about their favorite Stevie Wonder songs and the chords that he played and what these songs meant to them and how much they resonated with them. And Tyler was talking about how he put kind of features or reflections of those songs in his own music and in his own album. I listened to his albums hundreds and hundreds of times, but I have never been able to be like, oh, this is a reference to this Stevie Wonder song and that makes me like the thing. You don't need to spell it out. You don't need to spell out the samples and the references, and your audience doesn't need to even understand your reference points or even like your reference points for them to get so much value and to love specifically the thing that you've created. And I say this because I think we can worry about if we're not paying attention to the right things, or we can worry that we need to be taking in things and have some kind of like finger on the pulse of what is happening in the world to be relevant in the world, when that's simply not the case. To be relevant in the world means that you're creating something that resonates with people. It means to create something that sparks that inner magic of recognition in that area of risk and of vulnerability. And no part of that is, okay, we all get the same references. Okay, we're all telling the same jokes. We all have the same insider stories. In fact, it's the exact opposite for that. And I always say in the membership, in my courses, if you are in CAD creator, you've heard me say this a million times, like if you're making a deck, don't look to other decks of your sources for inspiration. If you're wanting to make content, don't look at other content creators and what they're creating. Look to the things that genuinely inspire you. That might be a record cover. It might be a Stevie Wonder song. It might be movies that you don't think anybody else likes, but you are obsessed with. It doesn't matter what the reference point is. It matters what you do with that material. And usually the thing that sparks that interest in us, that sparks that feeling of magic and recognition inside of us, it's that feeling that we're all communicating together, that they've made something that turned you on and that's inspired you so much that now you want to put your energy and your time and your attention towards creating something that's going to turn other people on. And it's this ongoing energy cycle that doesn't require us all to get each other's reference points and to understand the nuances of every single part that's gone into it. But what is required is that you commit solely to the things that inspire you. You allow yourself to fall down the rabbit holes of inspirations that might be really obscure, that might not necessarily make sense to the people in the world around you, but they trigger something in you. They excite something in you. And in doing that, they up your creative energy. They up your energy in life in general, because it inspires you to do something, inspires you to move differently and to contribute to the conversation. And I think if we let ourselves just be on autopilot of consuming the same stuff, of thinking we have to be telling the same stories of everybody else and showing up in the same way, is it any wonder that there is this general feeling of boredom and dissatisfaction? Your job, if you want to be yourself, but even harder, if you want to feel turned on, if you want to feel excited, is to let yourself fall deeper into your own interests and your own obsessions, and to not have to have it all make sense, not have to explain yourself every step of the way, but let yourself be pulled by the things that genuinely compel you, that genuinely turn you on, that make you feel like yourself. I feel like myself when I'm listening to the music that I love, or I feel like myself when I'm painting the things that, like the colors that make me feel really good, or I'm on the wheel throwing something that feels right. It just feels right, you know? When you're making something and it just feels right, that is when your energy multiplies through the process, when it stops being something that you have to muster yourself up for, that you have to somehow, some way do this thing. That's probably where you're finding yourself procrastinating, right? That's probably where you're twiddling your thumbs and being like, oh my God, I have to do this thing today. And so said I have to post this many times on this many platforms. And you're probably not going to be feeling very excited about it. When instead, you can let yourself follow what does feel exciting to you. The things that might not make sense, that might not be what the platforms are telling you to do, or what the gurus are telling you to do, or what feels like the way that the world is moving. But when I look to the way that the world is moving, or what the majority are doing, that doesn't look very exciting to me. But when I let myself step away from it and get into my own space and listen to the things that excite me and start creating from that place, that's when I feel like I have something to contribute. And that's when I feel energized. And this is basically what I wanted to share with you all today, of let yourself step away. Let yourself step into your own place, into your own energy, into your own interest and excitement. And God, just let go of this need to keep up with whatever's happening, whatever trends you feel like you have to follow. You're not going to get left behind, because there is no area, there's no thing, there is no parade that's going. And if there is, it's a really fucking boring copy and paste kind of parade that I don't want to be involved in. That isn't very interesting. It isn't very exciting. I would rather be with the weirdos who are doing their own thing and contributing something that's different, contributing that maybe a lot of people won't get it, but the people who do, the people who it sparks that feeling of magic for, that's where the real creative communities live. That's where the real resonance lives. And if you think, for example, about a song that is just your favorite song, or a movie that's your favorite movie. It doesn't matter whether it won the Oscar for the best film. It doesn't matter if it got the most streams on Spotify. It's your favorite song. It's your favorite movie. No one can get in the way of that, you know? And I think we need to stop looking at what everybody else is doing, or what everybody else is thinking, for confirmation that, am I on the right track? Is this the right thing? Should I be doing this? And to get centered in ourselves and what excites us and what we want to be pursuing, because that is where satisfaction on a human and on a creative level lives, when we let ourselves be ourselves, but even harder. Thanks so much for listening to Big Creatrix Energy. Vivian is just sprawled away, the longest dog you will ever see. If you want to become a member of the Creatrix Coven, The details will all be below. We have a group call in a couple of weeks where we all get on and chit chat, ask the questions, talk about projects, all of the good stuff. If you want a place to be a creative and talk about your dreams and your ideas with a bunch of people who get it, then the Creatrix Coven is for you. Remember, you can be, do, and have anything and everything that you dream of. I will speak to you in the next one. Bye.